What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. This is Faraz Siddiqui. I'm here with Zach Rizzuto. We're going to go over all of the trades that happened right before the trade deadline. That was an exciting one, man. I didn't expect that many trades to go down because usually when it comes to the NFL trade deadline, it doesn't get too crazy. It
All
usually doesn't
smoke.
get too crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, maybe one or two guys get moved, and it's usually no big names, right?
Mhm.
But we got a couple of, fantasy relevant trades that went down, more than a couple, actually.
Yeah.
So let's get right into it, man. There's been a few big ones. And the biggest one for me was Nyheim Hines being
Yeah.
traded to the Bills. Um, Nyheim Hines, he's one of the best pass catchers in the NFL, right? And he's going to one of the league's best offenses now. And the Bills have been trying to get their guy for a while now, right? They drafted Devin Singletary in the third round in 2019. They drafted Zach Moss in the third round in 2020. And then they specifically started to go after pass catching running backs, right? They started to get more pass heavy, right? And
Yeah.
that's pretty much what they wanted to do. So they then tried to sign Chase Edmonds. Believe it or not, if you remember last offseason when he was a free agent, he ended
Yeah.
up signing with Miami. Apparently, they were very close to signing a deal. All right.
Mhm.
They literally had JD McKissick locked in until McKissick changed his mind last minute in free agency himself. And then
Yeah.
and then they drafted James Cook. And all three of those guys were pass catching specialists. And then they were in the running to get Christian McCaffrey. So what does all of this tell you about Devin Singletary? That he's not their answer in the receiving game, right?
Right.
And if you look at Singletary's work this season, he's had more than 10 carries only 3 times, and he's third in the NFL in routes run per game. And if you look at his efficiency, right, there's 19 running backs who had at least 25 targets this year, and he has 0.98 yards per route run on the season, and that's tied for second to last.
Mhm.
And when you look at last year, he was last in yards per route run among qualified running backs. So you look at what Nyheim Hines did, over his whole career, he's been a very efficient pass catcher. This year, fifth among qualifying running backs with 1.88 yards per route run. That's only behind Alvin Kamara, Antonio Gibson, who's a former wide receiver, Brees Hall, Christian McCaffrey, and Austin Eckler.
Yeah.
And last year, he was seventh in yards per route run among qualifying running backs last season, right? So,
Right.
it doesn't seem like James Cook is all the way ready based on this move. Like they're in a Super Bowl window right now, right? They're trying to go all in and win this year. I'm not so worried about James Cook in terms of like dynasty. But I think in terms of a Super Bowl window, I think that Hines is going to help him do that. And my assumption is that he is going to be running a ton of routes for Josh Allen, and I think he could potentially see 5 to 7 targets a game, in addition to maybe a few carries on the ground. And
Yeah.
I think he's going to end up as a potential PPR RB2 with upside on the Bills.
I think this is an awesome move. The Bills clearly have an agenda and they know what they want to do on offense. Devin Singletary, he was getting it done, but that was just, they had him there. So that's who they were using. But with Nyheim Hines now, he is the pass catching specialist that they're wanting. This wasn't a run first offense ever, and it's not going to be that way the rest of the season. They didn't add Nyheim Hines to run the ball. They added him to catch the ball. I like this move a lot too, maybe even a little bit more than you. I think that he's going to take a lot of work from Devin Singletary. I don't know how much he's going to see the field, and that's why I was a little bit reluctant. I know we talked about on this podcast Devin Singletary maybe being a buy, and I didn't necessarily anticipate the Bills going out and making this type of move, but this only hurts Devin Singletary's stock. I don't see how Devin Singletary is going to get a majority of the snaps. I think they're going to run a lot more pass plays and run plays, especially with Nyheim Hines in the mix now. I think that he has really good upside. I don't see how. I think that he might be a solid RB2 upside. And his floor should be safe because of his receiving work. Much more so than Devin Singletary, who's probably going to be getting early down work. Maybe if he can hold on to that, it's still just going to be majority of runs for him. They've been telegraphing. It seemed obvious, especially like you said with the guys they were pursuing between Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick and other guys that they wanted to get a pass catching back. They finally have it, and I think they're going to use him.
And they got a good one. They got a better one than the ones that they're pursuing. Like
Yeah.
JD McKissick. Well, JD McKissick's up there, I think, with Nyheim Hines. Like these two guys over the past several years, they've been, two of the best pass catching specialists in the NFL out of the backfield. So either of those guys, I think, would have been a big part of their game plan. They wanted James Cook to be that guy, but it just doesn't seem like he's ready. And
Yeah.
that's fine. But listen, the Bills are about that business right now. They're trying to win a Super Bowl, and they're trying to compete with the Chiefs, and they're trying to win that big game in the playoffs, and they're trying to do whatever they can to do it, and they're just trying to make their offense unstoppable. And
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see where Nyheim Hines falls in the pecking order of target share, right? Stephon Diggs is all the way up at the top, but who's next, right?
Right.
Like there is a huge gap and a huge delta between Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis when it comes to target share. So we'll see where Nyheim Hines falls in that range. Now, as far as Devin Singletary goes, it obviously hurts him, right? Like he's running so many routes. A lot of that's going to go to Nyheim Hines, and the early down back on this offense is not going to be worth that much because there aren't a lot of goal line carries to go around for running backs on this offense, and Nyheim Hines might take a few of those carries away on early downs as well. I don't see him, just because you got to switch it up a little bit, right? Like I don't see
Yeah.
Nyheim Hines just running out of the backfield and catching passes. I don't think he's going to have 0 carries and like 7 targets a game, right? It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
2, 3 at least, at the very least. So, this is going to be interesting to watch moving forward, and this offense just got a little bit better.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't really see a world where, Devin Singletary doesn't lose 90% of his receiving work, especially with Nyheim Hines there. I don't see a world where he holds on to more than, a catch or 2 a game. I don't think he's going to get that many looks.
Nyheim Hines was holding back Jonathan Taylor,
Right.
right? And let's talk about the impact on the Colts now. Like, if we're going to assume that Jonathan Taylor is healthy, I think he ends up eventually having a 3-down role. And I've seen a lot of people saying that Deion Jackson is going to fill Nyheim Hines' role, and I really doubt that. It takes
Right.
a special pass catcher like Nyheim Hines to take Jonathan Taylor off the field, and that was the reason Hines was on the field at times over Jonathan Taylor. It's because of the fact that he's legit in the receiving game, one of the best in the NFL. And Deion Jackson filled in admirably for JT this season, but that doesn't make him Nyheim Hines' replacement, in a rotation.
Yeah.
JT was already the primary third down back. He just wasn't
Mm-hmm.
playing the 2-minute offense. Like that was all Nyheim Hines this year. So I don't think that, Deion Jackson's going to come in and play that 2-minute offense. I think it's going to be Jonathan Taylor, assuming that he's healthy.
Yeah.
They did sign Jordan Wilkins. Like if you remember a couple of years ago, Jordan Wilkins was in this part of a rotation, like early in
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Taylor's career. But he kind of fell off the map. But they did sign him to sign him to their practice squad. So now they have Zach Moss, who came in in that trade as well. Zach Moss. They have Jordan Wilkins on the practice squad. They have Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
And Deion Jackson. That's it.
Only good. This move is only good news for Jonathan Taylor. I think. I think at the beginning of the season, we heard all the reports. Oh, we don't want to, overuse Jonathan Taylor. Now you've just removed Nyheim Hines from the mix, and it's pretty clear that your offense isn't going anywhere without Jonathan Taylor. I think now they kind of have to give Jonathan Taylor that workload. Your quarterbacks, the passing game isn't, helping you out. The running game hasn't been perfect, and we know Jonathan Taylor's been a little bit banged up, but he's going to come back healthy. I think he's going to get majority of the workload again, and he should. Like I said, I think I'm not going to bet against Jonathan Taylor. I think he's going to come back and look a lot more like Jonathan Taylor than he has in the past few weeks, especially if he can pick up just a little bit of the passing work. Obviously he had a couple games where he had some targets coming his way, but it hasn't been consistent. I think it'll be a little bit more consistent, his workload now, a little bit more diverse, and it'll help him in the long run to be, have a higher floor, I think, than he's had. I think his upside is still attainable. He's just still a few weeks out from that, I think. I think he will get there, though. But in the meantime, this receiving work that is going to be left by Nyheim Hines should be split. The most of it's going to go, I think, to Jonathan Taylor, and that's going to help him. Better weeks are ahead because of this, even more so than before because Nyheim Hines was moved.
Yeah, as of right now, it's noon on the East Coast, so we haven't got any word on the Colts' practice status just yet. But we'll see, if Jonathan Taylor's practicing today. He might not, because he did twist his ankle again on Sunday. So he might not. The reports later in the week probably a little bit more, accurate and more predictive of whether he's going to play this weekend. But just make sure that, if Deion Jackson's available on your waiver wire, whether you have JT or not, probably a good idea to pick him up right now.
Yeah.
Okay. we had TJ Hockenson traded to the Vikings, who basically have lost Irv Smith for the season. This is an upgrade for the Vikings offense for TJ Hockenson as well. Kirk Cousins gets an upgrade too. And if you look at like how he's performed and how Irv Smith has performed, it's kind of night and day. Like when you look at when you kind of look deep in this, among 11, let's see, there's 17 tight ends this year with at least 30 targets, and Irv Smith was dead last in yards per route run. TJ Hockenson was fifth in yards per route run, and that was only behind Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, David Njoku, and Dallas Goedert. Obviously, that big game played a huge role in those numbers, but you got to count it all, right?
Yeah.
And if Irv Smith was second on the team, and he was, by the way, in targets per route run ahead of Adam Thielen, I think Hockenson is going to earn some targets on this team and be a solid tight end one for you for fantasy.
Yeah. I don't think there's a world where he isn't a tight end one. I'm not so sure I'd call him, an elite tight end one. I'm not going to put him right into that top 5, top 6, like you say, where you can start them every week and they're reliable and you can just, set it and forget it. I'm not necessarily at that point with TJ Hockenson in Minnesota yet. I do think Adam Thielen is going to stick around and be a pain. That's just the kind of way he's been, especially for Justin Jefferson owners. Those quiet weeks, you can kind of attribute some of that to Adam Thielen. But it's a really good addition on paper. I'm curbing my enthusiasm just a little bit. It is exciting. I think TJ Hawkinson's in a better spot than he was in Detroit. Not only is it a better offense, but he should have a bigger role. I think he's going to be able to get more targets because Kirk Cousins is just a little bit better than Jared Goff, I think. So I think that obviously he's going to be much better than he was in Detroit. But I want to see how he does. I want to see how he gets used this first week coming back. I think that there's a lot to be excited about, but like I said, I'm just kind of tempering expectations for this week. It might take a week or two before we see him kind of get, into the actual flow of the offense. It is already Wednesday. He should get a full week of practice, but that remains to be seen. So I'm just curbing my enthusiasm a little bit, but it's a good move overall. Bottom line is TJ Hawkinson's stock just went up.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Now, as far as the Lions go, like on that side of the ball, like I don't know if it helps anyone specifically. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's going to continue to get targeted at an elite rate. Maybe Josh Reynolds can get some extra targets going his way. That would be ideal. To have the targets just like more concentrated between like Amon-Ra and Josh Reynolds, but we'll see, right? The next tight ends to step up are Brock Wright, followed by James Mitchell. Mitchell's more intriguing to me, but Brock Wright is likely, to get the first crack at the job to replace Hockenson. But like for fantasy right now, I'm not really interested in either of them. But we should keep an eye on what the route participation looks like in this first week without Hockenson. Are they sharing the role, or is one guy getting it all?
Right. I don't think the Lions are going to be, any different as far as are they going to throw more or run more because of this. Even though TJ Hockenson had that one big day, they have plenty of weapons that they can rely on in the passing game. I don't think it's going to change the way they play offense too much. I'm not picking up any of the Lions tight ends and saying, all right, maybe you can start them and have a little value. We've seen how tight ends are this year. I don't think there's anything to be excited about too much. You might add one prospectively if you're in a really bad spot at tight end, but otherwise, I'm just keeping my hands off of it. The offense remains, just about the same as it was prior to the trade.
All right, let's take a look at this trade from the 49ers to the Dolphins. Jeff Wilson was traded to Miami after the Dolphins traded away Chase Edmonds to the Broncos in the Bradley Chubb deal. It's funny, like the Bradley Chubb got traded, that was the big name. And then if you look in the trade details, you see that Chase Edmonds was dealt in that deal. But let's start with Jeff Wilson real quick. Edmonds was completely phased out of the Dolphins offense, right? He played only 36% of the Dolphins snaps, after coming in as a big money free agent. But okay, we can hit on Edmonds, but I think the problem with Edmonds in Miami was that he didn't fit the outside zone run scheme, right? And Mike McDaniel thought he could add that to his game, given how explosive he was. If he can figure out that one cut burst and run through that line, he'll be able to like pick up some big plays, but it just didn't work out. And because for me personally, like if I'm thinking like, all right, if this guy can figure that one cut and run, bouncing off tackle, you think about a guy like Edmonds, that's kind of intriguing, right? But apparently those outside zone run scheme, like it just didn't happen for him. When Edmonds was in Arizona, he was playing on an inside zone run scheme offense. And he said himself this offseason that he was getting used to that, and it's just different. And it looks like he never got used to it. So,
Yeah.
and they just shipped him off because there was no hope. Jeff Wilson, on the other hand, he's an outside zone guy, right? And obviously had success with that under Mike McDaniel and Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. And, we'll see if Mike McDaniel always wanted this to be a committee between Chase Edmonds and Mostert, right?
Yeah.
Like, now that he has someone who knows his offense so well, maybe he does just that. And there's no way to know right now, but you have to think, given Mostert's injury history, given his age, that it might be a good idea for them, right? Like, maybe not for fantasy because that wouldn't be good, but for real life purposes, it might be a good idea to lessen the workload a little bit on Raheem Mostert.
Yeah. And I'll hit on the Dolphins, backfield soon when we talk about buys and sells this week. But with Jeff Wilson coming and Chase Edmonds being shipped out, I think that, the familiar face in Jeff Wilson is going to work a lot better just because they have that history and that connection between Raheem Mostert and Mike McDaniel. Chase Edmonds, we were a little bit higher on him than most. Coming into the season, we thought if he could integrate into that offense, well, he could be the receiving back. He'd have a little upside, but that hasn't worked at all. He's been a non-factor since I think week 2. So I'm not surprised to see Chase Edmonds moved. I think it's only good news for Chase Edmonds, but with Jeff Wilson coming in and going to the Dolphins, I think that he's just going to be a thorn in the side of Raheem Mostert. I think this is going to look more like a committee at backfield in the backfield. It's a passing offense too, so it's already tough to trust a running back. We saw it last week, with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill both going over 30 points, and then Raheem Mostert had 7 points. It was a relatively quiet outing. I'm expecting to see more of that. So adding a new running back, they replaced Chase Edmonds as soon as they got rid of Jeff Wilson. They're clearly not ready to just have Raheem Mostert take the keys and lead the backfield. They want to have more than one guy involved. So for me, it's just the exact same situation for Mostert with just a little bit more risk because Jeff Wilson, is familiar in the offense. I think he could be a contributor much better than Chase Edmonds was.
So do you think it's possible to still have a chance to sell Raheem Mostert? Or do you think that Jeff Wilson coming in is just a key indicator where everyone's just like, oh man, like he has no value anymore? You think there's still a window?
It's not a no value. I think there's definitely a window, and he is one of my sells for today with Raheem Mostert. I think that, Jeff Wilson coming in on paper, if you leave out the fact that he's familiar in the system, and some people might not, immediately jump to that conclusion. If you leave out that fact, it looks like just a 1-for-1, same thing. You get rid of a running back, you add a running back. Neither of them own their backfield when they were on their own respective teams, with Jeff Wilson in San Francisco and coming in, Chase Edmonds didn't really have the stranglehold on the backfield unless injuries were a thing. So I think that it looks exactly the same on paper at this point, and that's why I'm saying get your hands off Raheem Mostert right now. But we'll talk about that later.
Okay, well, you can talk about it now. If you have more points to make about Raheem Mostert and more, if you can sell us on selling him a little bit more, man, I'll take it.
Yeah, I would sell him. I'm saying that, like I said, they clearly aren't interested in the backfield revolving around one player. They immediately replace Edmonds. That's one thing. They're thrifting in San Francisco, so it's hard to imagine a world where they both don't get touches, Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. Like I said, I think that they're going to have Mike McDaniel's going to get them both involved because they got that little connection. Chase Edmonds, they brought Chase Edmonds in, like you said. I think they had high hopes for what he could be in Mike McDaniel's offense, but they figured out that really wasn't working. A few weeks in, that he wasn't really fitting the offense. That's why we saw Raheem Mostert get more touches. And then the same thing, with, like I said, the passing offense. Why would they, start running the ball and become a run-heavy team? They're not going to do that. If they're throwing the ball, Raheem Mostert isn't really the guy to be doing that. I think Jeff Wilson's a step down in terms of receiving ability from Chase Edmonds. I think they have two similar running backs now, so I'm not sure how much we're going to see the pass game in the backfield. But, that's just bad news for both of them. If they're on the ground, in the ground game, I don't see any of these guys eclipsing, 70 yards on a regular basis. I think we're looking at more like 30, 40 yards complementary to help just complement the passing offense. That's going to be driving the offense.
That makes sense. Now, when you look at Chase Edmonds' fit in Denver, the Broncos are also an outside zone run scheme.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's going to work out there either. However, he is apparently being brought in as the passing down guy. Okay. And, the one thing that Edmonds does have an upper hand on is the fact that a couple things, right? Melvin Gordon was in the doghouse earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. his head coach is talking about, oh, he's going to start, and then Latavius Murray ends up getting more carries than him that game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Latavius Murray's Latavius Murray, right? Like not a whole lot of competition here for Chase Edmonds. Okay, we could see him enter that rotation. We could on early downs even. We could see him play over Latavius Murray at some point with Melvin Gordon being the primary 1A like bigger back. It's possible. We might see a Melvin Gordon Chase Edmonds 1A 1B situation at some point.
Yeah.
The reason why I think Edmonds is a little bit of a winner because like the dude, he had 0 fantasy value. He was done. Like this year, like it was a lost year for him if he stayed in Miami. Like if Raheem Mostert stayed healthy the entire year, who knows if Chase Edmonds would have been the guy even if Mostert went down, to be honest, because they were trying other backs out, right? And they kind of knew that like, hey, if Mostert ends up getting hurt, we can't have Edmonds as our lead guy. It wasn't going to work out, right? So we'll see what happens in Denver. It's not a scheme fit, but these two other running backs ahead of him, they have their own issues. And Edmonds could potentially, overcome like his own issues because of the other running backs they have on their roster. It looks crowded, but it might not be as bad as it looks.
Right. And you say about it looking crowded, it's true. But what Chase Edmonds has working for him is he's bringing something they don't already have to the offense, in the offense to the offense. And that's the pass catching ability. Latavius Murray is not a pass catcher. Melvin Gordon, he was a pass catcher back in the day, but he's just been struggling recently. And it doesn't seem like they're too, enamored with the idea of keeping him as, a clear cut RB1, giving him the majority of the carries. They've been mixing it up a little bit. Chase Edmonds, he adds a dimension to the offense. Like I said, the passing game, it'll almost give Russell Wilson a safety valve, maybe that he didn't have before. And I think he's the most explosive of the three right now that we're talking about, the big three. It's going to be Melvin Gordon, Latavius Murray, and Chase Edmonds. He's the most explosive of those three in the backfield. So if Russell Wilson's going to be checking it down, might as well get it to somebody who's going to be able to run after the catch. I think this is a good add for the Broncos offense. And I think that, he could carve himself out a nice role to the point where it might not be the role that we want him to have in Miami, where he gets like 10 carries and like some targets in the game, but he might be a safe enough floor player because of the receiving workload that I think he's going to get. The offense has not been that good throwing downfield, and Chase Edmonds could be the beneficiary, just catching passes out of the backfield.
It is possible, for sure. Now, and then, with Jeff Wilson getting traded, Elijah Mitchell remains the clear handcuff to Christian McCaffrey when he's healthy, when he becomes healthy, right?
Right.
I definitely want to, because, you never know. If Christian McCaffrey were to ever get hurt, you never know. Elijah Mitchell might have been sharing the load a little bit with Jeff Wilson, given how well he's been playing this year.
Right.
All right, let's move on to Chase Claypool, who was traded to the Bears, giving Justin Fields another weapon to work with. Now, you have to upgrade Fields, right?
Yeah.
Because he literally had no one to throw to outside of Darnell Mooney. I don't think Claypool was worth a second-round pick.
No.
But I'll say this. But I think it's worth giving Fields, more to work with, right? Whoever it is, just to help him in his progression that we're seeing right now, right? He's improving, right? And at this moment, to give him another weapon right now, in this moment that Justin Fields is going through, I think it's a good move. You know what I'm saying? And I think he can continue to improve right now. And you can only go so far and do so much without a couple of solid weapons, right? His ceiling was capped, right? And I hope, as a result of this trade, the Bears start to let Fields drop back more. Over the past 5 weeks, he's averaging less than 23 pass attempts per game. Over those games, he's dropped back 163 times, which is 16th in the NFL. So that's not bad, right? And that might even go up a little bit more with this news. Now, as far as Claypool's value, even with a big, even with a little bit of an uptick in overall pass attempts, like I don't think there will be enough to go around for him and Mooney. And I don't know if this is a hot take or not. I have no idea what people generally think about this, but like I prefer Mooney because he's shown the ability to be efficient. He's shown the ability to command a large target share, command a large air yard share. He's a good wide receiver, and I just think he's a better wide receiver than Chase Claypool. He's been able to put up production in like a terrible pass environment, right? Passing environment, right? This season and even last season, to be honest with you. And Claypool has not shown that ability himself.
Right.
But I do find it kind of funny though, like just to kind of bring this up, that Chase Claypool did in fact announce his replacement at the draft
Yeah, that is funny.
when he went up to the podium, and announced that the Steelers were drafting George Pickens, and everyone at
Yeah,
that moment was like, "This dude is literally
drafting
announcing
his
his
replacement.
replacement," and that's
Yeah,
literally what happened. but
yeah, it's just how it goes.
but his replacement, like this trade is great for him. It's great for George Pickens. It's
Hmm.
great for Deontay Johnson. It's great for Pat Frymuth. Because Claypool, he was getting a decent number of targets per game, five,
Yeah,
6, 7, 8 targets a game. And those targets need to go somewhere. And now it's probably going to be a lot more tightly distributed between those three guys. So the Steelers receivers, I think, are, getting a little nice win here with Claypool moving on to Chicago. But what are your overall? That was a lot. Sorry,
yeah.
Zach. But
No, you're good.
what are your overall thoughts of this trade?
I think Chase Claypool has a chance to be a lot better than you just described. I'm not saying that he's going to be a wide receiver 1. I'm not saying he's going to be a high end wide receiver 2 or even a wide receiver 2, but I think he has a chance to be a lot better on the Bears than he was on the Steelers. He was competing with some very good receivers. George Pickens is nothing to sneeze at. It's clear that Kenny Pickett, had a connection with him, and we know Deontay Johnson. He commands targets, and he's a good receiver. He gets that target share every week, regardless of whether they're winning or they're losing. That's just how Deontay Johnson is. And Pat Frymuth was, having a quiet breakout season. Obviously, you can call it a breakout because the tight end landscape is just so barren. But, he was also showing a little connection, too, with Kenny Pickett. And the quarterback situation was bad in Pittsburgh. He goes to still a questionable, at this point, quarterback situation in Chicago. But with Justin Fields, it seems like he's more on the upswing. And there's not that much competition when you look at it. It might look like a crowded room. You see the guys that he's been throwing to, Dante Pettis and Equanimous St. Brown, and we know that Darnell Mooney's there. Cole Kmet just scored his first touchdown since 2020 last week. That's not going to keep happening, so you don't have to worry about him. So, but when you look at it, I think Chase Claypool is better than everybody except maybe, like you said, Darnell Mooney. So this is a nice wide receiver 2 addition to the Bears offense. He's a big receiver, which the Bears don't really have, even though Equanimous St. Brown, he's a little bit taller than most of them, but it adds a new dimension to this passing attack, I think, that the Bears haven't had. He's a solid overall receiver, so just a new target and a new toy for Justin Fields to play with at a good time, too, with him coming off his best offensive performance. I think this could be a nice addition. He could quietly have some good games and provide some value as a wide receiver 3 and a really nice flex play, I think, on a week-to-week basis. So I actually like this move, even though the Steelers, may have received a little bit more than they should have in return. They probably how do you think that phone call went when they were talking about facilitating this trade? They're like, yeah, he's a talented receiver. Our quarterback situation sucks, though. He'd probably be good with Justin Fields. He's like, just sell him on that. Remember that was it a 4-touchdown game? Remember that 4-touchdown game in 2020?
I'm sure Mike Tomlin, he probably muted the phone and looked at everybody in the room and said, "They're offering us a second round pick."
Yeah.
And then we're just like, take it.
Right.
You unmuted it. All right, you got yourself a deal.
Yeah. It's close. It's close. He goes, it's close. We think he might be worth more, but we will take it. We'll do you a solid here because neither of us are going anywhere this year.
I do the same thing in fantasy football trades. Like when I offer a trade and it gets accepted, and I have a feeling that I really won that deal.
Yeah.
I still even though after they accepted it, I try to make them reassured, and I'll send over a text or something. I'll be like, "Hey, great deal, man, great deal." It's just one of those things. I need a receiver, so
my favorite line. Hopefully this works out. Hopefully it works out.
Hopefully it works out. Hopefully they score.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to, I wanted to talk. Okay. So you like Claypool a little bit more. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. I like it more for the offense and Justin Fields and, this offense to continue to move. But
yeah.
But okay. I can see that. I mean, Claypool has had his games. He could potentially have a few games, this year, on that offense, maybe being a more of a focal point, right, for that offense. And we'll see. I would bet on Mooney to maintain target share and air yard share and all of that.
Yep.
But it's possible that I wonder where Claypool plays. He was playing the slot for the Steelers. I would assume he'll play on the outside, but maybe they go to 11. Yeah, maybe he'll go 11 personnel and play out of the slot, but we'll see. We'll see. He hasn't had so much success on the outside, but we'll see what they choose to do in Chicago moving forward. I wanted to touch on Calvin really real quick. He was traded to the Jaguars, obviously still suspended for the rest of this year. And this move definitely helps Trevor Lawrence, right, next year. with Calvin Ridley,
Yeah.
Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, right? He'll have a solid wide receiver core, assuming all those guys are still there, assuming those guys are healthy, and assuming Calvin really gets reinstated because he still has to wait on that and get Roger Goodell's blessing. But nice little upgrade for Lawrence in Dynasty.
Yeah, in Dynasty, I think that's definitely how it's going to go. Calvin Ridley suspended. It's hard to get excited because he's not going to be playing, at all this season. It's like, wow, they added a player that we're not going to be able to see till next year. That doesn't help anybody. But it doesn't look like the Jaguars are going anywhere. They're still in, it looks like, a rebuild. Trevor Lawrence, people give him crap for not being as good as advertised. He was a really good prospect coming out of college. He's had some rough teams to work with, and they are getting better, but it's just the way it's going. We still got to give him a chance. I think that next season with Calvin Ridley, things are going to be a lot easier for Trevor Lawrence moving forward. That's the biggest upgrade. I'm not sure what Calvin Ridley's going to do. We haven't seen him. He's been out of football for a long time, almost like Michael Thomas-esque amount of time. So we'll see how he looks coming back in an offense that isn't really that good. But unless we see major steps taken, I'm not going to be able to project anything for next season. But this could be good. I think Calvin Ridley, I don't know, his fantasy value at this point, I think it's about the same. He was going to be competing with Garrett Wilson and Kyle Pitts if he did come back and play for the Falcons, next year. But I'd say the offense, even though he is probably the clear number one there, I'm not sure his value moves up that much higher than it was. I think it might just stick around right where it was.
Yeah, when he got suspended, I was saying just to sell him. Like, if you can get like a 2023 second, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sell him. If you get anything less than that, like, don't. But a 2023 second, I was willing to sell him for. I still am, by the way. Josh Sanders put this in the chat in the live on YouTube. I overpaid for Justin Fields in Superflex. LOL. All caps. LOL.
Yeah.
Sent him Derek Carr and Tyler Boyd. Josh, this is not an overpay.
No, it's not. Oh my
it's
God,
not an overpay.
No. Especially after the week that we just saw Derek Carr have. No, not an overpay. Look, Derek Carr.
What did we say in our rankings episode, the quarterbacks rankings episode? I literally said, I'm ranking Derek Carr high this week. You know what that means. When all the expectations are on Derek Carr to perform a certain week, what does he do? He shits the bed.
Yeah.
Every single time. He does not disappoint. So here's what we're going to do. Good matchups, we're not going to rank him high anymore. Mediocre to bad matchups, we'll put him like where he belongs, which is like QB 15.
Yeah.
No matter what. Okay.
Right.
Good.
I'm glad I said, we call him, at least I called him sidecar, and he's not doing that job. He's not helping Devontae Adams. He's not doing his job. It wasn't a good week. He has no rushing upside. Justin Fields is rushing. We're talking about him as a potential QB1 now. That's easily in Superflex. The value that you just got there, you just upgraded for pretty much nothing. Okay, Tyler Boyd, chances are he was on your bench, or maybe you're starting him at flex this week because Jamar Chase was out. But that's a really good deal for me.
Seriously, man. All right. This is usually our buy sell episode. So we're going to give you a little bonus. Let's throw a few buys and sells. This is really the trade deadline show, but you know what? We can't help it. Let's go through some buy sells. All right. One of my main ones that I want to talk about was Brandon Aiyuk. Okay. I love Aiyuk as a talent. So this one's a little tough for me, right? I think him on another offense, there's no way I'd be selling. But there's an embarrassment of riches on the 49ers right now, especially in the pass game, right? They just got Christian McCaffrey, who will be heavily involved in the receiving game, obviously. Deebo Samuel. They have George Kittle. Aiyuk had a big game this past week, and Deebo didn't play. Jawan Jennings didn't play. And Jawan Jennings, he's not getting a ton of targets, but 10% target share in the season. Okay, so it's something. But when Deebo comes back and this team is at full strength, there might not be enough targets to go around. And I'm just not sure that double-digit target upside is there, like what Aiyuk has had, in terms of what his, what that ceiling was for him. I don't think it's going to be there. He's had 3 straight big fantasy weeks, and they're going into the bye. So I'd sell. I mean, they're in a bye right now, so I'd sell to someone who is willing to keep him, right? Like during this bye, there are some good matchups on paper in those games after the bye. Okay, so I would use that in my argument, right? It's like, oh, like, hey, like I can't use him right now. I need to win this week. Here, like I know you can afford, like pump up the ego a little bit. Yeah. I know you can afford to have Aiyuk on the bench this week because you have such a good team. You're going to get the win this week anyway because you have such a good team. You can afford it. I can't afford it, right? You
Yeah.
gotta say it like that. All right. You gotta put some oomph into it. Okay. And then you look at those
Yeah.
games after the bye, right? Uh Chargers, Cardinals, Saints. Like those are teams that like you look at that, like, oh, like receivers can do good against those teams. But here's the thing: the 49ers defense, they're relatively healthy again, right? And those three teams that I just mentioned, they might struggle on offense against the 49ers. And
Yeah.
we can easily see the 49ers defense and the 49ers offense like kind of controlling the ball like on in the run game with Christian McCaffrey. And that target share will be the overall targets will be lower. The distribution might be a little bit wider between the four guys that I mentioned. And it might just limit Aiyuk from hitting the totals that he's been hitting lately. So that's why I'm looking to sell Aiyuk right now at where I think the height of his ceiling is.
Yeah, I think this is a really good analysis. Even though I've liked what I've seen from Brandon Ayuk definitely,
Me
and he
too,
looks
man.
the talent. It looks like he's finally breaking out and having that role. But like you said, the number of weapons in this offense is ridiculous. And on a team with a defense as good as the Niners, are they really going to be in game scripts? We're going to have to throw the ball. If they're throwing the ball, chances are it's going to be Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, or nice safe routes with George Kittle, or Debo Samuel will be doing, running and passing work and receiving work. It's not Brandon Ayuk. It's just the fact that they have all these players that they want to get involved and can get involved. It's going to be a super efficient offense, but without the workload, he's not going to see, like you said, 11 targets, 6 targets back to back. I don't think we're going to see any more strings like that again the rest of the season. So I think it is time to sell Brandon Ayuk high. And at this point, his value is actually very high. I think
Very
the
high.
way it looks, because like you said about the upcoming schedule and what he's done the past few weeks, not only has he got a bunch of targets, but he's catching those targets and he's turning them into touchdowns, 3 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. He's doing it. He's doing his thing. So he looks like a really solid wide receiver 2 right now. You could say he has wide receiver 1 upside on a weekly basis. He doesn't have to be a side piece, anymore in a trade. He could be the main course, I think, depending
Yeah.
on who you're targeting. I would go after a guy like maybe DK Metcalf with him, something like that, or maybe even an Amari Cooper.
Ooh, I like that.
Amari Cooper is quietly really good.
I like that. I like that a lot. And you can see Amari Cooper's value going up a little bit at some point. I like that a lot. Now, you mentioned earlier that you had Raheem Mostert as a sell, and there's still a sell window. But who are you
Yes.
looking to buy this week?
I'm looking to buy DeAndre Swift. And I know he didn't look too fantastic coming back off of that injury. Dan Campbell did say that he's not necessarily 100% yet. And I think they quoted him. He said they gave him 1 too many carries or something like that. I don't know how that looked. He got 5 carries, but the work wasn't what we wanted it to be coming back from an injury. We figured he would hopefully be close to 100%. At this point, especially after missing all the time that he did, and he still isn't. And that's not really encouraging news to hear from the coach, that he could still be a week or 2 out from being 100% and getting that full workload. I'm buying that, right now, especially if you're a DeAndre Swift owner and he has missed, has been 5 weeks for you, and he comes back, he puts up 14 points. Okay, he scores a touchdown, but he only gets 5 carries. And then the coach comes out and says he's not 100% and they gave him too much work. Like, how happy are you going to be with that? You're going to be really disenchanted with your running back at that point. He still did lead the team in snap share despite not being 100%, 33 snaps, 55% share, and he scored. So that's encouraging to show that the talent is still there. It's not that he's not losing a step because of this injury. It's just he has to come back from it. The price is really low. He left fantasy managers pretty much out to dry this past 5 or 6 weeks. If anybody drafted him, they're going to say, all right, there's too much inconsistency here. Let's offload him. I think you could get him for a really good price at this point. And as he gets healthier, he's going to continue to take over his backfield. And I was really tempted to put Jamal Williams as one of my sells, but I thought that was just a little bit too easy. Obviously, if you're buying DeAndre Swift, you're not going to want to buy, or hold on to Jamal Williams. I think that DeAndre Swift is going to take over this backfield again, like he had in the first week where we saw his upside. 175 total yards was it? I think something like that, and 2 touchdowns. So I'm buying DeAndre Swift, even though things look bleak right now.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the reason, right? Like his value is really low right now, and it's looking discouraging. It's going to only go up from here, and he's going to potentially hit that elite ceiling that we know he has. Then it's worth buying, at his lowest price, which is right now.
Yeah.
Jamal Williams, you mentioned him, right? Like I'm fine selling him, right? Like I think you can another 2 touchdown performance, right? Like even when Swift is out, his role doesn't change too much. And when Swift plays, like you're not going to feel so comfortable playing him, right? Like there's going to be a lot of times where he's going to score 2 touchdowns, but it's going to be on your bench, right? Because his
Yeah.
touchdown or bust with him, right? So, most times he's probably going to be on your bench just because like you have other studs at running back. Like, are you really going to bench Jonathan, even though Jonathan Taylor is like off, right, this season?
Yeah.
Are you going to bench Jonathan Taylor for Jamal Williams? Probably not, right? Like most of
No.
the time you're not going to do that. So like, unless you're like going strictly by the numbers and you're like, well, whatever, I'm going to start him because he's been getting me fantasy points. It makes sense, but you probably won't end up doing that. So at the end of the day, he's somebody that you could potentially sell in a package as like that second, like that side piece, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Very strong side piece
instead of
because of his
saying like side piece and like main meal, like we should call it side piece and like and girlfriend or something like that. Like
side piece
he's
and
like
main hoe.
main hoe. I like that one, Zach. Jamal Williams is not the main hoe here. He's
Yeah.
the side piece. So you combine the side piece with a main hoe, and you go get yourself another main hoe.
A wife.
That's a wife. Go get yourself a wife, man. That's a good trade, man. A good trade, man. Like if you can if you can trade your main hoe, if you can trade for a wife, that's a good trade.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You
So
know you're making
I like
money that
a lot.
way, yeah.
I like that a lot. Oh, 100%, man. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's see. So I had another. Who else did I have here? Oh, a guy I wanted to sell. Deontay Foreman. Okay.
Yeah.
Deontay Foreman, listen, I get it. Like he had a huge week and everyone's very excited about Deontay Foreman. If I had him, I'd be kind of excited. I'd be intrigued. But this is his ceiling, guys. Okay, he just had a 3 touchdown game. He had a big game the week before, right? He's had a couple of monster games. Do we really think? And like credit to the Panthers, they did a great job, right, over the past 2 weeks. PJ Walker, I love the story, right?
Yeah.
But do we really think are the Panthers going to go undefeated for the rest of the year? Like, is that what's going to happen here, guys? Like, did they suddenly become a good offense? No.
Yeah.
Okay, this happens all the time, right? A head coach gets fired, right? They get a little bit of juice, they get a little fire. The whole league is, kind of like they're like the laughing stock of the whole league. And these players, they adjust and they come through, but it's not going to last forever, right?
Yeah.
So I personally would not be looking at him as somebody who I'm going to be able to depend on for the rest of the year. Now, did he win the job in Carolina as the 1A? I think so. I think he has. And I think, with Chuba Hubbard potentially coming back this week, I think it's going to be a timeshare.
Yeah.
I do think that Deontay Foreman is going to be the primary back in that timeshare. However, are we going to say that this offense is bad or good or somewhere in between?
It's going to be bad.
It's going to be bad. Okay, we know what we saw over the past couple of weeks. Like it was solid, but this is not what's going to happen every week, guys. Okay, so Deontay Foreman, even though he's the 1A, even though you think you got something on your bench, the way I look at it is like I still got something on my bench. I got a very valuable asset right now that I could use to. Is Deontay Foreman a side hoe? Is he a side piece or a main hoe?
Yeah,
right now.
No, side piece.
He's
now.
a side piece, right? So you combine Deontay Foreman as a side piece, you combine him with one of your main hoes, and then you go get yourself a wife.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how I would play this. Now this is it, Zach. Like it's over now. Like this is going to be our thing now forever.
Yeah.
For every buy
trade discussion,
any trade, you got the side hoe, you got the side piece and the main hoe. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyway, 100%. So I personally like when Chuba Hubbard comes back, he's going to be the primary pass catching back at the very least. They liked Chuba Hubbard before he got hurt, man, and he was their 1A. Okay, so I don't think he's just going to be thrown to the side. I really don't. I think he's going to be involved. So 3 touchdown performances aren't going to happen that much, especially on this offense. So if I can sell him now while his value is very, very high, where people are actually thinking that he could be their RB2 for the rest of the season, like I would take advantage of that right now.
Absolutely. Deontay Foreman, he gifted you this, sell window. Before last week, nobody would have said, even after, both Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard had a good week, nobody would have said that, okay, these guys are going to be, they have a chance to be RB2 the rest of the season. Now he goes out and he gets a hat trick, 30 plus PPR points, this week. And now we think that he could be, the lead back in this offense. first of all, the offense is not going to put up 34 points, like you said. It's going to be a bad offense. And they're going to bring Chuba Hubbard back. And even though, Chuba Hubbard's going to be back, it's going to be a timeshare, this 3-touchdown performance lets you say, all right, well, it looks like Deontay Foreman is going to get the majority of the touches. And that's going to be like, okay, people are going to be able to sell that. It's going to require you to be a little bit manipulative at this point to sell Deontay Foreman to maximize his value. You could sell him and say, okay, he's going to be, he's a good running back, on a relatively bad offense, he'll be able to do his thing anyway. He'll be a solid RB3, flex play for you. You could sell him like that, even though he did have a really good week. But if you want to be a little bit manipulative, you could say, all right, he might get the majority of the carries, he might get the majority of the passing work, that kind of thing. Just try to spice it up just a little bit. You might be able to milk as much value as you can out of Deontay Foreman before, he leaves your team. I think that you could, add him as a side piece. He's a really juicy side piece, believe it or not, to any deal that you're trying to put together right now. Much more so than guys like, Chase Edmonds. We talk about him maybe being a guy that might have a little bit more value at this point. In a couple of weeks, I think that, even Chase Edmonds his value in a couple of weeks isn't going to add up to what Deontay Foreman offers right now as a side piece.
Chase Edmonds is a side hoe. He's not even a side piece.
Yeah, that's
true. All right, so you had another very interesting sell.
Yeah. And
outside of go ahead. Just go for it.
People might come at me for it, and I was a little bit reluctant to even say it myself. I know I texted you before the podcast. It's like, you think I'm going to get flack for this, but is it time to sell Dameon Pierce? I'm not saying that he didn't look good, but I'm just taking all things considered, the ideas moving forward. And I know he's excellent. PFF loves him. He had the most broken tackles in that one game 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he looked really good. He's a young running back that looks like a star. But this is an offense that has scored just 7 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. And 3 of those touchdowns came against the Chargers 4 weeks ago. The past 3 weeks, they scored 4 touchdowns. He was en route to a 6.8 PPR point fantasy performance last week before a complete garbage time touchdown. Complete. It was with 13 seconds on the clock. He scored a receiving touchdown. So not only was it a rushing touchdown, it was a receiving touchdown. Really pumped up his performance. And he's got a tough upcoming schedule. He's got Philly tomorrow night, and the Giants are on deck the next week. Washington is suddenly resurgent, and their front isn't anything to sneeze at. I know Dameon Pierce looks really good, but this Texans offense does not look good at all. And now there's even more trouble and drama going on with Brandon Cooks, who put out that cryptic tweet. The passing offense hasn't been there. They're going to be in negative game scripts almost every single week. I don't see how, Dameon Pierce is going to be able to maintain a solid workload these next 4 weeks or, beyond. I think if you're trying to make a playoff push, you might be kind of screwed if you try to hang on to Dameon Pierce here in the negative game script these next 3 weeks. That's what I'm assuming will be the next 3 weeks. That will be negative game scripts. I think that Dameon Pierce looks really good. He is a very good running back, but if you're playing the end game and you're trying to get to the playoffs to make this push, he might be expendable for you.
Zach, I'm buying Dameon Pierce. I'm buying him.
All right.
I'm not just not selling him. I'm buying him. I feel like this is a little bit of an opportunity here. Okay, we had a little bit of opportunity over the past 2 weeks. He still had 2 very good, from a fantasy box score perspective, right? 14 PPR points, 15.7 PPR points over the last 2 weeks. Not great. Okay, in terms of like last week, 15 for 35. Tennessee was a tough matchup. We knew that coming in. Okay, the difference from last week. Here's what happened after the bye. In week what week was last week? Week 8.
6.
They had a bye in week 6.
Was their bye. Yeah.
Yep, week 6. They came back after the bye. The passing game work, the 2-minute offense went to Dario Ogunbowale in week 7. In week 8, guess who it went to? Dameon Pierce. Dun dun dun.
So you're hyping up the guy that put up 14 fantasy points.
Yes. That guy. So this is the first game of the entire season this past week where he got the 2-minute offense. The entire all of those snaps. And that's huge. But what that means is that he's an every down back. If it continues, right? Like this is a 1-game sample size. But the fact that they took that job away from Rex Burkhead last week, in week 7, and then they shifted that work over to Dameon Pierce the week after, tells me that like it's not Rex Burkhead's job anymore, at least. right? So this is a situation where I'm like, okay, like the Philly game before Thursday, it's a tough matchup on paper. Buy him before then. And I'm not saying that because I want to have a running back against a bad team, but because people are more willing to trade you a running back if they have a tough matchup coming up. On top of that, it's a Thursday night game. On top of that, everyone assumes, and I probably assume this too, that the Eagles are going to destroy the Texans on Thursday night, right?
Yeah.
But hey, if he has the 2-minute offense, if he has the passing down work, if he's on the field on third downs when they're passing the ball and he's running the routes, he might get some extra targets, even against Philly. So I'll be okay with it. He might have a decent floor, a higher floor than we think he does. I don't think it's going to be very often where he's going to average 2.33 yards a carry, right? Since week 1, 4.6 yards a carry, 4 yards a carry, 10 yards a carry, 4 yards a carry, 4.6 yards a carry. So I think he'll be all right for the most part. We mentioned the schedule too. Philly next week, Giants the following week. That's a good matchup for him. Washington the following week after that, not as good, but overall, like I think the Texans can potentially like at least move the ball a little bit against Washington. Miami, similar thing where I feel like Miami will go up. So this is a situation where yes, the Texans offense is bad. However, if he's going to get that passing down work, if he's going to get the 2-minute work, his value just went up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hear you. And you have valid points. I think my points are pretty valid too. And the way
I
I'm
think so.
looking at it is I'm looking at more, it's not so much in a vacuum, just looking at the matchups. I'm looking at it, your team moving forward. If you're like me in one of my leagues, I'm 3-5. I have Dameon Pierce. I might be looking to sell him because, like I said, these next few games are games you're going to need to win. And this stretch run, it's going to be tough for Dameon Pierce, I think. Even though you said he does have a nice floor, maybe if he gets that 2-minute work. It's the first week that it happens, so I want to see if that sticks. But I'm happier, selling. His value is still high right now. If he didn't score that touchdown last week, it would be a little bit lower. But he's kind of masking the fact that Texas offense is really bad by producing still, despite that in fantasy. So his value is still very high. You don't want to call. I don't think he's an RB1, but I think he's a solid RB2. And that you could get really good return for him if you pair him with somebody like a Tyler Boyd. You could go get yourself a nice starting running back. I think a low-end RB1, maybe a guy like Leonard Fournette, even at this point. And I know I'm higher on Leonard Fournette than maybe you are, but I'd be looking at that type of deal.
Guess who I'm trading Leonard Fournette for?
Dameon Pierce.
Trading Leonard Fournette 1-for-1 with Dameon Pierce.
Really?
I'm buying.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I'm buying Dameon Pierce 1-for-1 with Leonard Fournette.
We're polar opposites.
I love it. This is exactly what we're looking for. So let's see. I didn't have like anybody else that this episode was really just about the trades, but a couple of guys that you might want to consider buying. Okay. Travis Etienne, obviously, it's his backfield. It might on paper on the surface maybe like, wait, what? Like, how can you buy him?
It will not be a buy low.
He only had one big game. It won't be a buy low. It's a buy high. It's a buy high. It's not a buy low. It's a buy where like just assume if you're buying that he's going to continue to have the type of games that he had this past week, right? Where he only has like 125-point game on his game log right now. Everything else is like under 20. But just going forward, just assume that you're going to see like 20, 23, 25, 28. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what it's going to be from now on. And he's going to be impossible to buy, in a couple weeks. I don't think he's impossible to buy right now, where you can, buy him as a low-end borderline RB1. Meanwhile, if his usage continues, he's going to be a solid, top 7 running back for the rest of the season, right?
Yeah.
Let's see, Jonathan Taylor. Listen, man, I want to get your thoughts on Jonathan Taylor real quick. Just a quick thought on him. Obviously, we need to figure out like, what his health is looking right. Are you, and we talked about the trade, right? His trade value. I mean, I'm sorry. We talked about his trade, his role in the trade. His value went up, assuming he's healthy.
Right.
Like people don't want anything to do with Jonathan Taylor right now. Like I think that's the sentiment for the most part. So are you taking advantage of that? Just like how you're taking advantage of it with DeAndre Swift?
Yep. 100%. And I've talked about a couple times on the podcast already with Jonathan Taylor. I'm not betting against him. I think he's going to get it right. He just has to get healthy. And I know we've been saying that for a couple of weeks. He missed time and he's kind of left you out to dry if you drafted him, especially, if you're looking back and you're looking at, you took Jonathan Taylor over Christian McCaffrey, things are looking bad. But I think Jonathan Taylor can get back to being Jonathan Taylor, especially now with Nyheim Hines out of the picture. Like I said, if any of that receiving work goes to Jonathan Taylor, it's only going to help solidify his floor. So I think that things should get back to normal with Jonathan Taylor. He should be back to, finishing inside the top 10 pretty safely these next few weeks. Just got to have him get healthy. And at this point, it doesn't look like the Colts are going to make the playoffs, but they're going to be contending in the games. They're going to be competitive, at least in games. So I think that, he's set up to succeed. I think even though things look bad right now, you could take advantage of that, get him at a relatively low price. He might not be the 53-point performance Jonathan Taylor of last season, but I think he can get back to being a really nice contributor for your team. A low-end RB1 at worst, I think, is what I have in the cards if things go how they should with his health.
Yep. He's not practicing today. Okay.
Right.
So pick up Deon Jackson. If Deon Jackson, it's only Wednesday. Okay. It's possible that he ends up, practicing on Thursday, practicing on Friday. He plays. But just in case, I pick up Deon Jackson. We know what kind of big game he put up previously. It was a lot of it was because of the receiving game, obviously, and we don't know. We don't know if he's going to get targeted the same way, without Matt Ryan. However, it's worth picking him up and playing him if Jonathan Taylor misses this week, because he probably will get an every down role.
Yeah.
Especially without Nyheim Hines as well.
Yeah.
We kind of saw that, before this season, right? All right, let's see. Anybody else? Amon-Ra St. Brown, still very viable. We talked about him multiple times over the past couple of weeks. He had a very high target share in this game. Relatively low depth of target. He didn't go crazy in this game. He didn't score a touchdown, so you still have a chance to buy him. You still have a top 6, 7, 8 fantasy wide receiver 1. Okay, just do it if you can. All right,
one guy.
You had one more buy or sell. Who'd you have?
A buy, and I'm talking about T. Higgins. Now, T. Higgins, I think you look at it. Yeah, I think this is a pretty easy buy. In my book, I was looking through just players overall, how they're doing, and trying to decide who I was going to say buy, sell. This looks like an easy buy. The game log these past 3 weeks is working completely in your favor because he hasn't topped 15 points in a game yet, but he also hasn't gone below 10 points. He's been consistently middling as a receiver, and that's not what you'd expect with Jamar Chase out. We've seen him do his thing without Jamar Chase. I think that T. Higgins, it was an uncharacteristic bad performance against Cleveland, and he still came out, with a respectable fantasy showing. If you had T. Higgins, he has missed some time this season too, so he's been on and off for you. The inconsistency has been there. I think the buy window is wide open, especially with Jamar Chase still slated to miss some time. He has an excellent 4-week stretch coming up with games against Carolina, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, and Kansas City. A bunch of easy defensive games and a bunch of shootouts. Kansas City and Tennessee might be a good one. Majority of those will be without Chase in lineup. They do have a bye mixed in there after the Carolina game in week 10. We're not exactly sure how long Chase is going to be out, but you can use that, mystery against you. Here, T. Higgins might be against the guy that has him. Here, T. Higgins might have like 4 or 5 games yet on the schedule with Jamar Chase out of the lineup. It's only going to be good news for him. Just capitalize on that pessimism surrounding their offense. I'm not sure what kind of deal I would make for it, but if I have DK Metcalf maybe and I want to upgrade, I would maybe shoot for T. Higgins because we've seen Joe Burrow. He cooled off after 2 straight really good weeks, but I think they could get back to that. They've been a bit bipolar this season on offense. The Bengals have, so we'll see if that continues to be the trend. But those games where the Bengals offense looks right, the upside for these guys is through the roof.
Cleveland was a tough matchup, to be honest with you. And, the hopes were there, but like if he didn't have a good game on Monday night, I wasn't going to be surprised. And the fact that he didn't have an amazing game, I wasn't surprised, to be honest with you, because it was a tough matchup. And, Cleveland, is nothing to sneeze at, especially on the perimeter, right? They've been doing a good job against perimeter wide receivers and against the slot too. So neither of these guys were able to have a huge game. They have Carolina this week, which is a much better matchup. They go into a bye. They have Pittsburgh, very good matchup. Tennessee, very good matchup. Kansas City, very good matchup. So, like if Jamar Chase is going to be out for the next several weeks, I think Higgins can come through for you pretty nicely. So yeah. I think that's a good call. I think we're going to end it here. That was a great episode, Zach.
Yeah.
Thanks to everybody who listened. Appreciate you guys. I hope this helps kind of breaking down all the trades, and hopefully you'll be able to make some moves. This week, before you go into week 9 officially tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to be back with our quarterback and running back rankings. We're going to preview Thursday Night Football as well. All right. Take it easy, guys. See you later. Peace.